ini adalah program dari DOS, Asosiasi International PhD di Hongaria. Jadi salah satu dari kegiatannya adalah merekatkan hubungan-hubungan antar negara di Hungari dengan beberapa negara-negara melalui jalur dari mahasiswa PhD. Nah, kebetulan hari ini saya yang mewakili DOS, ya, mohon izin dari beberapa panitia yang tergabung di dalam kegiatan ini, beberapa dari universitas di Indonesia. Dan tahun depan akan lagi banyak yang bergabung, ya, dari teman-teman dari UGM, dari UI, dari BRIN, dan seterusnya nanti akan bergabung dengan kegiatan-kegiatan ini yang kita tentukan. Kita akan nanti membahas tema-tema selanjutnya. Yang terhormat Pak Dimas Wahab, Duta Besar Indonesia untuk Hungaria, terima kasih sudah berkenan hadir di acara ini, ya. Berkenan hadir di acara ini, Public Lecture Indonesia. Yang terhormat Pak Aron, pembicara dari LT, Java-Eotvos Lorand University, Hungary. Yang terhormat rekan-rekan panitia dari Universitas Java-Eotvos Lorand University, Yudayana, Universitas Pendidikan Ganesha, Debrecen University, Unpati, Patimura University, UPN Veteran Jakarta, dan beberapa panitia Universitas Airlangga, Bu Murdiati selaku moderator, terima kasih telah menghadiri. Untuk lebih singkatnya, kita bisa mempersilakan Pak Dimas untuk memberikan opening remark kegiatan ini. Waktu dan tempat dipersilakan Pak Dimas Wahab.
Ya, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Yang terhormat Bapak Laki Aron dan hadirin semua. Selamat pagi. Ya. Pertama-tama, kedengeran ya? Pertama-tama saya berterima kasih diberi kesempatan hari ini untuk bisa bicara, khususnya dalam rangka acaranya?
Public Lecture Hungarian Indonesia.
Public Lecture, ya, Public Lecture dari Bapak Laki Aron, ya. Dan luar biasa di mana Pak Laki Aron ini mempelajari budaya Indonesia secara sangat mendalam, mungkin lebih dalam daripada kita-kita. Seperti kita ketahui bersama bahwa Indonesia ini kita tahu bahwa begitu luas, ya, dengan 17.000 pulau, penduduknya begitu banyak, agamanya, semua agama ada di Indonesia, tapi sampai hari ini setelah beratus-ratus tahun itu kita masih bisa bertahan seperti satu keluarga besar. Ini semata-mata sebetulnya kekuatan budaya. Kekuatan budaya dari bangsa Indonesia, mungkin kalau Pak Laki Aron ini lebih banyak di Jawa dan budaya Jawa tentunya. Dan kalau kita melihat latar belakang yang majemuk ini, bukan berarti kita tidak pernah ada friksi di antara kita semua. Seperti kejadian-kejadian di daerah-daerah, di mana saja, di Jawa, di luar Jawa, apakah itu karena perbedaan-perbedaan yang ada, selalu bisa diselesaikan dengan cara budaya. Sehingga ada kata-kata yang bisa dianggap lucu, tapi pada kenyataannya itu benar. Diselesaikan secara adat gitu ya. Jadi memang adat yang bisa menyelesaikan semua masalah di Indonesia. Dan untuk masalah agama sendiri, kita tidak hanya cukup bicara mengenai Islam. Sebelum Islam masuk pun pernah ada Hindu dan pernah ada Buddha. Dan mereka itu tentunya juga pasti ada benturan-benturan. Tetapi bisa diselesaikan dengan kekayaan budaya yang ada, sehingga orang Hindu asli saja mungkin kalau ke Bali juga rasa bahwa wah ini Buddha Siwa gitu. Jadi ada istilah Buddha Siwa. Jadi Hindu tapi ya Buddha juga dihormati gitu. Jadi begitu juga dengan waktu Islam masuk ke Indonesia, di mana kita tahu bersama bahwa masuknya Islam itu dengan cara yang sangat damai. Jadi ini yang luar biasa dan tanpa terasa kita menjadi bangsa yang mayoritas Muslim. Dan memang kalau dibilang tadi Muslimnya beda, memang agak beda ya, karena itu tadi, karena ada pengaruh daripada budaya-budaya. Apakah itu di Jawa, apakah itu di daerah-daerah lain, sama saja yang budaya yang di Jawa terasa karena kita ketahui bersama banyak pesantren ya, yang selama ini makin modern dan itu juga menjadi tulang punggung daripada pendidikan di Indonesia. Jadi saya menghargai sekali apa yang dilakukan oleh Pak Laki Aron ini. Dan tidak banyak yang orang asing bahkan orang Indonesia yang mengedepankan keunggulan budaya kita ini. Kita bisa lebih spesifik ya. Mungkin belum lama, kira-kira 10-20 tahun yang lalu kan kita mengalami kejadian misalnya di Ambon. Itu bisa diselesaikan secara adat ya, dan tidak ada yang masuk ke pengadilan atau apa, tapi bentrokan itu, kerusuhan itu bisa selesai dengan damai karena budaya. Jadi saya mengharap sekali ini bisa terjadi terus-menerus di tanah air kita. Kalau kita lihat budaya kita sebenarnya intisarinya adalah musyawarah mufakat. Dan ini tidak dijumpai kata-kata musyawarah mufakat ini di dunia lain ya. Jadi musyawarah mufakat ini kadang-kadang agak bertentangan dengan demokrasi yang modern ya, yang one man one vote, yang banyak yang menang gitu. Kadang-kadang musyawarah mufakat ini bisa yang minoritas tapi yang dianggap benar itu bisa diterima. Ini saya rasa perlu kita pertahankan budaya musyawarah mufakat ini. Dan kita bersyukur bahwa musyawarah mufakat ini, kata-kata ini ada juga di salah satu sila di Pancasila. Jadi memang Pancasila ini terakhir kan seperti diakui oleh Bung Karno bahwa dia tidak menciptakan tapi dia menggali dari budaya-budaya yang ada di Indonesia. Jadi saya rasa nanti lain waktu Bapak Laki Aron ini juga lebih memperdalam mengenai Pancasila tadi itu. Ya, kenapa kata-kata itu digali dari budaya bangsa Indonesia? Jadi Pancasila itu betul-betul lahir dari apa yang kita alami sehari-hari di Indonesia. Jadi sekali lagi saya sangat menghargai ya, bukan hanya menghargai bahkan mengapresiasi apa yang dilakukan oleh Pak Laki Aron. Mudah-mudahan kita bisa diskusi di lain waktu, karena terus jujur aja saya agak senang untuk bisa diskusi soal budaya tadi. Jadi budaya itu bukan hanya dari segi pertunjukan, tarian dan apa saja, tapi dari jiwa. Jadi jiwa yang dalam dari seluruh orang Indonesia, apakah itu orang Jawa, orang Sumatera, orang Maluku, orang Nusa Tenggara Timur, semuanya itu punya budaya. Dan budaya ini mempunyai keunggulannya masing-masing. Kita lihat juga di Papua. Begitu sering ada bentrokan antar suku, antar kampung, tapi bisa diselesaikan dengan budaya bakar ubi ya, kalau istilah
batu.
Kita bakar batu. Nah itu bisa selesai gitu. Jadi tanpa ada yang perlu yang dihukum. Jadi itulah Indonesia. Saya rasa tidak kita jumpai di tempat lain. Sangat tidak kita jumpai. Saya juga udah kita lihat saja bangsa-bangsa di Eropa ini. Mudah sekali dia pecah-pecah gitu kan. Dan kita lihat juga bagaimana tadinya seberapa besar Hongaria ini dengan perubahan-perubahan setiap 1 abad mungkin berubahnya berapa kali gitu. Jadi karena menurut saya ada budaya-budaya yang patut ditiru dari bangsa kita. Saya berdoa dengan sangat bahwa ini tetap dipertahankan oleh anak-anak muda gitu. Dan saya rasa teman-teman yang mempelajari sejarah itu saya sangat menghargai. Kadang-kadang pelajaran sejarah itu tidak menarik ya, tidak menarik. Padahal sejarah dan budaya itu adalah sari daripada fondasi untuk melakukan putusan-putusan kita dalam menghadapi kehidupan. Saya rasa itu yang dilupakan orang karena selalu orang berpikir masalah ekonomi, masalah kemajuan teknologi, dan masalah lainnya. Tapi yang penting daripada itu semua, budaya adalah payung daripada hal-hal itu dalam menghadapi kehidupan ini. Sekali lagi, saya tanpa mau berpanjang-panjang, saya rasa nanti kita bisa bicara lebih lanjut di waktu-waktu yang akan datang. Sekali lagi saya menghargai sekali ya Pak Laki Aron atas pemikiran dan kerjanya, dan saya rasa mudah-mudahan untuk teman-teman kita di anak muda di Indonesia akan lebih banyak lagi yang mau tertarik akan hal ini, karena ini adalah kekuatan utama daripada persatuan dan kesatuan bangsa Indonesia. Sekian, terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih disampaikan Pak Dimas Wahab selaku Duta Besar Indonesia untuk Hungaria. Thank you very much for your opening remarks, His Excellency Dimas Wahab. For the next steps, we would like to give floor for Bu Murdiati. Bu Murdiati is one of senior lecturer in Department of History, Airlangga University. She is already has been researched for a long time in Indonesia and for history of women, history of social, and so on. And Bu Murdiati will be our moderator for this public lecture, Hungarian Indonesian Public Lecture Series 2022 and 2023. And for the effective hour times, we can give the floor for Ms. Bu Murdiati. Bu Murdiati, time is yours. Yes.
Terima kasih Mas Arya. Terima kasih Bapak Dimas Wahab. Selamat pagi, selamat sore di sini waktu Indonesia bagian barat. Di sini kami pukul 3:03. Jadi sebenarnya ini waktu yang krusial bagi kami di sini. Tapi tidak mengapa. Jadi saya kebetulan diminta oleh Mas Arya, kebetulan beliau Mas Arya itu salah satu student terbaik kami di sini dan kebetulan salah satu yang saya bimbing di jenjang S1. Terima kasih semua partisipan yang ada di sini yang telah meluangkan waktu untuk bergabung dalam public lecture antara Universitas Hungaria dan beberapa universitas di Indonesia. Hari ini kita akan kedatangan tamu yang sangat menarik mengenai presentasinya, Bapak Laki Aron dari Lorand University Hungaria. Beliau sepertinya wajahnya setelah saya ingat-ingat tadi ya, sepertinya saya pernah bertemu di Yogyakarta beberapa tahun yang lalu. Sepertinya berselisih jalan mungkin karena saya kebetulan alumni Gajah Mada, mungkin kita akan berselisih jalan. Jadi kemungkinan besar, tapi saya kurang tahu. Jadi saya boleh memperkenalkan di sini buat partisipan di sini, Pak Aron ini beliau hasil disertasinya mengenai connection of traditional Indonesian art and religion of Islam. Jadi sangat tertarik mengenai Islam begitu dan interaksinya dengan kesenian di Indonesia. Dan waktu yang sama beliau Pak Aron ini juga menghabiskan waktu risetnya ternyata di Gajah Mada pada tahun 2018 sampai 2019. Semoga saya tidak salah menyebut kurikulum vitae Pak Aron ini. Dan beliau ini juga menulis banyak sumber dan mengenai dan belajar juga mengenai bahasa Perancis, Belanda dan Cina dan sangat komplit ya. Dan Jawa tadi saya mendengarnya dari pernyataan Pak Aron, ternyata beliau ini juga memahami juga naskah-naskah Islam. Dan sekarang beliau semenjak tahun 2017 beliau mengajar di Fakultas Arab ya, Arabic Faculty of Alto mengenai bahasa Arab, kemudian sejarah Arab dan Southeast Asian Islam. Sangat menarik sekali Pak Aron. Dan setelah dia ini menyelesaikan program doktoralnya, dia juga sangat tertarik untuk memahami juga mengenai agama di Indonesia, kemudian sejarah agama yang ada di Indonesia, dan mulai juga untuk memperhatikan mengenai isu-isu mengenai Hindu dan Buddha. Selain juga belajar mengenai bahasa Sanskrit. Jadi sangat komplit sekali Pak Aron ini kalau melihat dari kurikulum vitae beliau. Jadi silahkan partisipan yang tertarik akan berkontak dengan beliau, Pak Aron akan sangat senang mungkin akan berdiskusi dengan Pak Aron. Baik, tanpa memperpanjang waktu, saya akan menyilahkan Pak Aron untuk mempresentasikan mengenai satu tema yang menarik dari hasil riset mengenai disertasinya mengenai Islam dan koneksi Islam dan Islam dan traditional arts di Jawa. Baik Pak Aron, waktu dan tempat kami persilahkan.
Ya, terima kasih. Now I will change to English because I have a lot of students also attending who don't speak Indonesian, I also will give the lecture in English. But if after the presentation there will be some questions and would like to ask in Indonesian, I'm happy to answer in Indonesian as well. Just for the sake of people who don't know Indonesian. English now. First of all, I would like to thank for the opening remarks from Bapak Dimas Wahab, His Excellency, the Ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia to Hungary. Thank you so much. As for the second point, I would like to thank Ibu Murdiati for introducing me. And without further ado, I will start my presentation. But first, I have to find how can I share my presentation. Wait a minute. There should be a wait a minute. Does anyone know how to share? Because I did use share here, but it was already a big long time ago.
Mas Obed,
yeah, share screen. I have it.
Okay.
I have it. Yes. Is it visible now?
Yes,
Is it?
Aaron.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay. So I will start. So thank you very much. And as everyone could hear, now I will present the connection of Islam and traditional arts in Java. First of all, I would like to give a very short sketch about the history of art and Islam in Java, because among the audience, not everyone knows so much about this topic, but it will be a very short sketch only. So before before Javanese people became Muslim, they were Hindus, and before that they had another religion, which also had a kind of an art. But we don't know too much about ancient Javanese art before the time of Hinduism because we don't have written sources, just only archaeological remains. But most probably, this was a religious kind of art with a medium communicating with ancestral spirits while dancing in a trance. It's very important because from here we can see that art was already sacral in nature, so it was connected with the gods. And then Indian culture arrived to Java along with Hinduism and also with Buddhism between the 1st and 4th centuries. And this is important because Javanese art becomes Hinduanized with a very strong resemblance to Indian artistic styles. It's very interesting that many times we can also see that which a piece of art from the Hindu period was inspired by which artistic style from India. In the Hindu period, art remained sacral. It's worth to mention that in Hinduism, art can be a kind of worship. So during these times, the Javanese were also venerating the gods, and different religious ceremonies were also containing artistic performances. And during these times, we already know that the kings were always the main patrons of arts, and their courts were artistic centers. This is important to know that today it's also the same. Like the great princely courts in Yogyakarta and Surakarta are still the biggest patrons of arts. So this is also a tradition which originates from the time before Islam. Islam became the dominant religion of Java in the 15th and 16th century. Of course, it was present even before that, but the dominant religion became Islam during this time. This is the age of the 9 saints, or in Javanese, the Wali Songo. For those ones who are not familiar in the audience with the Wali Songo, they were legendary figures who were credited with the spread of Islam among the Javanese. And they had a very special way of spreading Islam, which was through arts. These 9 saints used different kind of Javanese arts, which were already familiar and popular among the people. And they were, as we have seen, they were connected with religion, with Hinduism, but they took the Hindu teaching from behind and the Hindu message from behind these arts and filled it up with Islamic messages. And this way, the people could learn the new religion, not just in a very fast way, but in a way which was familiar to them, let's say in their own language. So it was not something foreign, but it became something very essential in their own culture. But from this period of time, we have very few contemporary sources, like written sources. All of the stories we know about the 9 saints originate from centuries after this time. So we have only legends. So we have to be very cautious when we would like to examine these stories. And just as I have said before, so traditional arts became the main means of religious change. And I also said that these arts were Hindu once, but now they are Islamic. In the meantime, a new culture appears, Santrism. Santri is a person who is really much, who has really deep knowledge in Islam and knows the rules of Islam and learns about Islam in a so-called pesantren, which is an Islamic school. For those ones who don't know that much about Java, but know about the culture of Islam, I can say that this pesantren system is very similar to the madrasa system in the Middle East or in the Arabic world. It's not exactly the same, but very similar. So people, students together learn from Islam together. And another important topic is the Kitab Kuning, which means the yellow books. These are books on Arabic, in Arabic language, usually in Arabic language, most of the time. And they are about Islam in general. We can find Islamic law books. We can find books on Sufism, like mysticism. We can find books on Arabic grammar or on the tenets of Islamic faith. So they are very important for our topic today, because these are the books where the Javanese learned about Islam. Religious law is based on Shafi'ite books, which is a school in Islamic law. And during these times, in the 15th and 16th centuries, the most prestigious authors were Al-Ghazali and Abu Shuja al-Isfahani. Both of them were 11th and 12th century Islamic scholars, originating from Persia. But both of them were wrote in Arabic, their books. But this time, at the beginning of Islamic history in Java, this corpus is still very small. The Middle East was very far away, and the Javanese just converted very recently, so they did not know too many books. We can see that we have evidence of what books did they read during these centuries. The very important thing is that many people think that the debate between religious scholars about arts only started at the beginning of the 20th century. What debate I'm talking about? This is the debate of are these arts which are rooted in Hinduism, are they permissible in the new religion, in Islam? Are they acceptable or not? And there were many different opinions among Islamic scholars. Some of them were for, like they were protecting and promoting these kind of arts, and the other people, the other opinion was that these arts are part of another religion and they should be abandoned. And actually, we know for a fact that this debate already existed during this time, not just from the 20th century. Then next, we have the colonial era. We have much more written sources, which we can base our research. During the 18th century, there was this big Mataram Sultanate. It was before the 18th century. But this time in the 18th century, this sultanate disappears because of the Dutch colonial enterprise, and 4 puppet kingdoms emerge in Java. They have no political power whatsoever, but they still want to say to the people that they are still their rulers, still their kings, sultans, and the like. And the only thing how they can assert this to the people is through arts, because the art is very important in Java. And they started to promote different kind of arts, and there was an artistic contest emerging between these 4 states. All of them wanted more and more people, of course, and the way to do it was through arts. And this was very beneficial for the Javanese arts, because of the contest, they always wanted to do better than the other courts, which makes a rapid development in art in Java, and the number of artists all financed by these courts. And this is actually the so-called the classical Javanese arts. The classical Javanese arts actually evolve around this time, around the 80th century. And it's very interesting because we can see that this is completely Islamic Java. So it is completely Islamic in the message of this art, but their style is still following the old tradition, the Hindu tradition. So it's a kind of a mixed art, which is very, very popular and interesting. During the colonial times, the corpus of the Islamic law books, the Kitab Kuning, also widens because of the better transportation. More books can arrive from the Middle East to Java. And this is the time when we have the dominance of An-Nawawi, this 30th century Syrian scholar, who is even today the biggest and most important author in Javanese Pesantren's. And this is the time when the already existing debates between Islamic scholars and art deepens, because now they have more books. They can base their arguments in much more written arguments.
Sorry, Pak Aaron.
Yes?
Sorry, Pak Aaron, your PPT, your presentations not move on from this first PPT. Sorry.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's try. to share it again. Just a moment, stop share. And let's, where was it, share screen? Is it visible now? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. So this debate between the let's say the enemies, it's not a good word, but the people who were discouraging ancient arts and the people who were promoting ancient arts, this rift deepens because of, with the foundation of the two big Islamic organizations in the beginning of the 20th century, the Muhammadiyah and the Nahdlatul Ulama. The Muhammadiyah was more strict in their rules, and they would wanted to follow like a more orthodox type of Islam, while the Nahdlatul Ulama was really tolerant and let's say supporting syncretism in Islam, and they were mainly for these art forms, and they were promoting them very, very much. Okay. Now I cannot go. Okay, this is just it doesn't. Okay, it works. Okay, is it visible now?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. So after independence of Indonesia, there was a great difference between the two sides. We know it from many sources that sometimes the followers of Muhammadiyah and Nahdlatul Ulama did not even want to pray in the same mosque. So there was a big difference between them. But everything changes at the 80s because, first of all, religion gets official support. So the government starts to talk much more about religion. And it also coincides with the revitalizing of traditional arts, also from the part of the government. So from both sides, the religion and arts, we see a revival. And the 80s is also interesting because the originally stricter Muhammadiyah becomes much more tolerant, and it makes peace with the followers of syncretism. They do not join them, of course. They still would like to follow a more strict form, but before that, they were sometimes, let's say, even a bit more aggressive. But from the 80s, Muhammadiyah also became a very tolerant organization, and today they are very tolerant. More strict, of course, than Nahdlatul Ulama, but very tolerant. If radical people, in every country there are radical people, I think, in the whole world. From the 21st century, new radical groups appear in Indonesia with a vision more closely connected to Islamic hegemony and Arabic culture. These groups are very small in number. Actually, they don't have too many followers in Indonesia. And I cannot only name just one, but there are many, but with a very few followers. But they have a very strong voice. I mean, they are very loud, promoting their point of view. And this means that the previously twofold discussion became tripartite. Before we had followers of syncretism and followers of orthodoxy, but now we have, in one end, we have the Nahdlatul Ulama, which are very tolerant ways of interpretation. On the other end, we have these new radical groups with a very, very, very strict. And in the middle ground, we have the Muhammadiyah, who's trying to follow, the golden middle path. Okay, and now I would like to go to the arts themselves after this introduction of the history of arts and Islam. First of all, I would like to talk about gamelan. For those in the audience who don't know what is gamelan, gamelan is a traditional Javanese musical ensemble. It mainly consists of metallic percussion instruments. There are other kinds of instruments in it too, of course, like other kind of drums or stringed instruments or flutes. But I think 80% of it is metallic percussion instruments. According to the Hindu Javanese legends, gamelan came from the gods. So here we also have a sacred origin. And it was very much connected to Hindu religious ceremonies in Hindu times before Islam in Java. We know it also from many sources that if not the gamelan which we know today, but instruments which are used in gamelan were used in religious ceremonies in Java during the Hindu times. And with its, anyone who have ever heard gamelan must know that its metallic sounds, the way the music is still enhances a mystical feeling, a mystical atmosphere in the audience. Of course, there is a fact when someone is watching a Japanese movie and these kind of mystical things appear in the story, there's always some gamelan music at the background. So, of course, it still has this kind of atmosphere. According to the legends, when Islam arrived to Java, the 9 saints, the Wali Sangha, were using gamelan for spreading Islam. There are many different saints who are accredited with the gamelan, like Sunan Rajat, Sunan Nuria, Sunan Kalijaga. But I think the most iconic saint is Sunan Bonang, who is attributed to the gamelan. The story goes that he was a very skillful gamelan player, and he played music very good, and all of the still Hindu Javanese came to listen to his music, but he wrote lyrics to the songs which were teaching Islam. So the people were learning Islam through music, through the arts, and this is how they could very fastly convert to Islam. And even today, it's still part of religious ceremonies, like we have the Sekatan ceremony, which is during the birthday of the Prophet Muhammad, the Mawlid, which they hold every year in Yogyakarta and Surakarta. And here, gamelan is very central in this kind of celebrations. But of course, its Hindu origins and its atmosphere is sometimes opposed by certain religious scholars. And I would like to talk about this debate now. Okay, yes, for the ones who didn't see gamelan before, so we can see these instruments. It's mainly brass instruments, brass percussion instruments, different types. But also we have other kinds, like these kind of drums as well we have, or even this chelembung, it's called. This is not so often in the gamelan, but sometimes we can see it. So during the 16th and 17th centuries, the most commonly used Islamic fiqh, so law book, in Java was the At-Taqrib fil Fiqh from Abu Shuja al-Isfahani. But this book does not write about arts, so we cannot consult this book. Besides this, the other very popular book among the Javanese was the Ahya Ulumuddin from Al-Ghazali, which is in the strict way of speaking not an Islamic law book, because it is about many other things as well, but it has a part about Islamic law. And even today, many Islamic scholars base their religious arguments on this book. So during the beginnings of Islam in Java, this was the main source of legislature. What can we read in this book? The Ihya Ulumuddin in general is not against music. It says that music is just the sum of sounds, and sounds themselves are not forbidden, of course. We cannot forbid a bird to sing. We cannot forbid a stone if it falls to make a sound. No one can do that. And the music itself is nothing more, just the sum of these kind of sounds. So if we cannot forbid the particles of it, they together making the music cannot be forbidden too in Islam. So music is fine. The only problem, which Al-Ghazali writes, are with some special kind of instruments, like the rebab, the lute, cymbal, a special kind of drum, the scuba, or the flute, mazamir in Arabic. But why? Not because of their sound. As he has said, of course, it is just a sound, no problem with that. But he had this experience where he was living in Persia during those times he wrote his book, that people who were listening to these kind of music were usually drinking alcohol after it, or they had like unlawful sexual affairs, which are not, of course, are not allowed. So he said that if people listen to these kind of music, then they might do these things. So it's better not to listen to these kind of music made from this kind of instrument. And this is how he categorizes music. He categorizes music as useful music and not useful music. not useful music. It is only for entertainment and nothing more, in his opinion. It's malahi in Arabic, entertainment. And the music is useful if it has a positive effect in war on the soldiers, like giving a good morale before a battle, or, and this is more important for us now, if it enhances religious feeling. So if I listen to this music and it is about religion, about Islam, and it makes me a more religious person, then it is a very useful music, and it is a very good music. And we have seen in the story of Sunan Bonang, of course, this was a very good religious music, right? Because it was talking about Islam, and a lot of people converted to Islam because of the music of Sunan Bonang. So, accordance to Al-Ghazali, gamelan music is very good for Islam. And even today, we have it in the Sakatan musical ceremony. So this is a very good argument for the defenders of gamelan. But we also know that during these times, 16th, 17th centuries, people were actually drinking alcohol during the Sekatan festival, which makes it kind of forbidden. So it's very interesting that we already have the debate for the defenders and for the attackers of gamelan, and they could base their arguments on the same book. On the same book, from the same passage, the people could say that, no, it's not good because people are drinking. But the other religious scholar could say, but of course, but this is religious music. It enhances religious feeling. So it is very important. So we already have this kind of debate in Java. In colonial times, gamelan developed further, many new instruments entering the ensemble. And this is actually very interesting, that what kind of instruments entered to gamelan during these times, because some of them might be categorized as forbidden, according to like the rebab, the suling, kecer, kendang, and all these. So it becomes a bit more debatable. And if we read the most famous Kitab Kuning, the most famous law book from this time, the An-Nawawi's book, the Minhaj al-Talibin, which is, I think, even today, it's one of the most prestigious books in Pesantren's in Java now. This book also make a distinction between useless and useful music, but not just music, but he also categorizes the instruments themselves as useless or useful. And he says that useless instruments are forbidden to be sold or inherited. But those which are useful, in Arabic, يَحِلُّ الْإِنْتِفَاعَ بِهِ, this is how he says in his book, these instruments are allowed to be sold, inherited, and even to be used. So now, not just the music is good or bad, but even the instruments themselves are good or bad, according, of course, to this book. Not everyone has the same opinion, of course, but he's a very influential writer in Indonesia. He also states, yes, in his book, he is writing about like he writes about lawsuits, and in lawsuits we can have witnesses, of course, but a witness cannot be held credible if he's not a good Muslim. He will not be credible, according to An-Nawawi. And he also states that a witness is not credible if he often plays the lute, the cymbal, flute, and other kind of some kind of instruments, or often listens to music or sing. It means that if somebody is sometimes doing these things, it's not a problem. But if it's always doing these things, then his credibility can be questioned. In general, we can see that he is more strict than Al-Ghazali in his opinion, but he still allows useful music, while useless or even harmful music is forbidden, according to his opinion. And this actually mean that gamelan had even more and more forbidden instruments. And we also know that drinking still did not cease during the festivals, which means that let's say the enemies of gamelan had more arguments in their hands against it. But on the other hand, it could still be categorized as useful music, strengthening religious feeling and for the war effort as well. So actually, the defenders of gamelan could still base the same book. Their arguments could be based on the same book, that yes, gamelan is good because it's a religious kind of music. By the 20th century, Javanese Islamic scholars start to rely on hadith literature. Hadith is something among the audience who doesn't know. Hadith is the stories about the Prophet Muhammad, and it's very often our basis of legal opinions. According to this, the hadiths, even more instruments could be forbidden. I have written like the flute is usually in connection with Satan, and stringed instruments in general, in Arabic, ma'azif, are forbidden according to the Prophet Muhammad. On the other hand, it was also the Prophet Muhammad who said that, but actually we know a story that he allowed 2 girls to play music and sing during the Eid festival. So, according to the first point, even more instruments could be problematic in gamelan. But according to the second point I have written here, there is still room for it as a musical example in religious festivals. It's the Prophet Muhammad himself who said that it's fine, music is fine during a religious festival. So it's very interesting how the discussion, how this debate unfolds itself. From the beginning until the end, both groups, who are for gamelan and who are against gamelan, could base their arguments on the same sources, which is very interesting if we think about it. Today, the Nahdlatul Ulama is protecting gamelan, mainly using legends of the Wali Songo, saying that, of course, if gamelan would not exist, the Javanese people maybe would still be Hindu. So, of course, it's very, not just important, but it's integral part of Islam in Java. And they can also base their arguments on religious law books like Al-Ghazali and Nawawi, and not just to them, because today we have even more religious law books entering the Pesantren curriculum. Like I just some examples, not all of them, of course, but the Fath al-Qarib al-Mujib also talks about the same thing. The Fath al-Mu'in, the Fath al-Mu'in even states that even useless instruments are allowed to be possessed. Well, if we don't play on them, this is a little bit interesting, but still, sometimes even useless instruments are okay, according to many religious scholars. The main thing which we have to see here, that in these books, we never have any explicit mentions of the main instruments of gamelan. Gong, katog, ganda, slantem, gambang, and so on. All of these we cannot find in the books, which is very evident why. All of these books were written centuries before the Javanese embraced Islam, and thousands of kilometers far from Indonesia. Of course, the writers of this book had no knowledge about Javanese culture whatsoever, so they could not write about gamelan, let's say, and most of the instruments which we can find in gamelan. So all the arguments can only be based in similar instruments, which we can find in the Middle East as well. So the arguments will never be very exact. We can only make comparisons, and a comparison by nature is always debatable. How do we compare it? Why do we compare it to that one? Is the sound similar? Is the shape similar? Are the people similar who play it? So this is a very difficult topic in Islamic law. Muhammadiyah was, of course, in the beginning was very strict, so it was against it. But today they are accepting gamelan music in general as part of Javanese culture. And they are even making their own musical albums, although not from gamelan. They make modern kind of music, but it's very important that they accept music as useful in Islam. And of course, the new radical groups, they are radical, of course, so they say that it's Hindu, it should not be used, and it destroys Islam. And just for one short sketch here, that they even condemned any kind of music, saying that Muhammad was against it. And here they have a very different interpretation of the hadith I have said before, the ma'azif, the stringed instruments. They say that ma'azif means every kind of instrument in Arabic. Actually, this is not true. Ma'azif means only stringed instruments, but they describe that, no, this means every kind of instrument. So now how it is, yeah? Okay. end of gamelan. And the next topic, the last topic actually, is wayang theater. Wayang is shadow puppetry, stories with the Javanese play, and it's a very interesting topic. Wayang originates either in Java or it came from India. I will not dive in this one now. There are two different theories about this. In Hindu times in Java, it was always connected to religious ceremonies. We know that if there was a religious festival, wayang was always staged. And its stories are mainly from ancient Hindu epics of the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. And even today, it's very interesting that even in Muslim Java, these are the most popular stories. The Tantu Pagalaran, which is a book written at the end of the Hindu times, states that wayang was invented by the Hindu gods. So again, we have a sacred, divine origin of this art. And Islamic legends, of course, connected with the 9 saints. Also, different saints are credited with using the gamelan of spreading Islam, but I think the most famous is Sunan Kalijaga. The story goes that he, just the same as gamelan with Sunan Bonang, that the Javanese also very much loved these kind of shadow plays, talking about the Hindu heroes, and they have learned Hinduism from these. And Sunan Kalijaga just took the Hindu message from the story and filled it with Islamic message. So the people were watching their favorite heroes, their favorite stories, which they already knew, but it was Islam behind it. And they learned Islam through these fantastic stories they all loved for generations. But the main inventions attributed to these Wali Songo, these 9 saints, actually we know it from a fact that they existed in the Hindu period already. We have stories of this Sunan giving jewelry, this Sunan inventing the lamp, the Blainchong. Some are inventing the stage, or the Panakawan, these special figures in wayang plays, special characters. We all know that these existed already before Islam from many different written sources. So this is a bit debatable. Even the story of Sunan Kalijaga shaping the figures is, we have to think about it. The story goes that because in Islam it's forbidden to depict human beings, Sunan Kalijaga made the figures in a different shape, like very long hands reaching to their knees, a very thin waist, a long nose. So this way they do not depict humans anymore, but let's say monsters or some kind of beings, and they are already allowed in Islam. But if we read the stories, not the stories, sorry, if we read the law books about Islam, which were in use during these times in Java, we cannot confirm this story. For the ones who have never seen wayang before, we can see these special shapes of the figures, which are, of course, they're not human. This is very, very obvious. So, first of all, we all have to know that in Islamic law, there is no explicit ban on depicting humans. It's mainly makruh. In Islamic law, there is a different category for haram and makruh. Haram means forbidden, should not do that. But makruh is something which is disencouraged. So Islam says that it's something which if you can avoid it, you'd better not do it. But if you cannot avoid it, or it's important for you because of something, you can still do it, and it's not a problem. And depicting humans, and we will see not just humans, is mainly makruh. So if someone feels that it's very important for something, and of course we can see how much it was important for spreading Islam, it's not haram. So we don't have a legal basis on this change. And also, if we read the book, Ihya Ulum ad-Din, the most famous book during the time of the Wali Songo, we can only read that clay dolls, which depict animate beings, should be broken, and textile objects with pictures of animals in it can be legally sold as well. Watching them is not allowed. This is another thing. The most important here is that it does not talk about leather. wayang figures are made of leather most of the time. Are made of leather. And of course, Al-Ghazali could have written clay, textile, and leather. These Kitab Kuning, these law books, are very special because they're always very, very explicit in what they want to say. If they enumerate the things, they will always try to say every possibility. And here we don't have leather. So according to the Islamic law, which the Javanese were familiar with during the time of Sunan Kalijaga, there was no legal basis on banning wayang at all. Also, there's no explicit mention of depicting human beings. It says animate beings. The word in Arabic, which he uses in the book, is hayawan, which in today means mainly animals, but in these times could also mean things with a soul. And how does the story go? It says that he changed the figures from humans to, let's say, monsters. So they are not humans anymore. There's nothing about this in the book. The book says animate beings. Monsters are still animate beings. So this is an interesting story from this point of view. On the other hand, if we would like to examine Hindu sacred text and Hindu religious law, there in different books like Brahat Samhita, Vishnu Dharmottara, and so on, others, gods and heroes should never be depicted as ordinary human beings. And they also have the same laws that they should have very long arms reaching to their knees. In Sanskrit, it's called Dirghabahu, or extremely thin waists. And a lot of iconographic specialties we can see in wayang figures are actually following Hindu religious law and not Muslim religious law, if we read the religious books, at least. And yes, this special kind of iconography is already present in old Javanese Hindu temples. I think the most famous example is Candi Jago in Eastern Java, where we can see very much wayang type reliefs. So during the 16th century, there was no religious basis whatsoever for banning wayang. So the story of Sunan Kalijaga, he had to alter the shape, is a bit questionable. But we also know, of course, that wayang became Islamic by changing the details in the stories. I will not go into this now because we don't have much time. But many stories have been changed from the original Indian stories to become Islamic. They were to teach Islam. During the 17th century, there were no new law books. There were new law books entering to Java all the time, but among these new books, there were no books where we could find any arguments about this wayang. But we know that there was a debate, which we can trace not in the law books, but in the wayang books. There were different wayang books written about the laws of how to stage a wayang and different stories of what can be staged. And we can see that during the 17th century, there were many people who were not interested in Islamicizing wayang. For example, the Kitab Manik Maya is not writing about this topic, is always connecting with Hinduism. But others would like to connect much more tightly wayang with the Arabs and Islam. The Kitab Konda is very interesting in this matter because it talks about how are the figures of Mahabharata and Ramayana are related to the Islamic prophets. So they become one family in this book. And so we can see that the authors of this book would wanted to connect much more closely wayang with Islam. And the legend of Sunan Kalijaga, which in my point of view should have appeared during this time, because this story shows that there was some kind of debate if it is permissible to stage wayang in an Islamic society or not. So the need to legitimize wayang arose during these times. In colonial times, as I have said, new law books arrived to Java because of the better transportation. So there were new law books read and taught in the pesantrens, Islamic schools. The Minhaj al-Talibin, which we were talking about before, it states that no animals should be depicted in an intact form. their head should be cut off if they say would if they would come alive, they would not they could not move because they would be already dead. And by this here, An-Nawawi meant things being a soul should not be depicted. So people, animals, monsters even. This is again problematic for the story of Sunan Kalijaga because Wayang figures are still intact in shape. Yes, they have even still many people in Java believe that that not just they could have a soul, but they have a soul, these figures. So the story becomes a bit more problematic again. And they are also moving. The Dalang, the Wayang master is moving the figures. So it's not just they could move, but they move, really move. And we have this very interesting, the Sarat Centini from the beginning of the 19th century. It's a very, very good book on Javanese culture. Here we have very exact evidence that there was a debate between the religious scholars of if Wayang is permissible or not. But in general, we can say that this book protects Wayang, saying that it really much depicts how God is controlling the world. Like God is also controlling the people the same way as Dalang controls the Wayang figures, and God already knows the stories the same way as the Dalang already knows the stories which he will stage, and he gives the voice of all the figures like God gives us our voice. So it says, this book actually says that through Wayang, we can reach God much easier and we can understand Islam much easier than other people. So, of course, this book is very much pro-Wayang, is very much is for staging Wayang. In the 20th century, we have the Hadith literature entering in the Java, which gave new arguments, of course. From these, now it's very obvious that people depicting beings with a soul will be punished in the day of resurrection, and angels will not enter a house with pictures of living beings inside, and these all should be destroyed. So this is what we see from the traditions of Prophet Muhammad. And this means that no animals or people should be depicted. So no animals, no people. But here again, we have another question. So what about monsters? Right? Because in the books before, we could read that, okay, monsters also not. But now we have Muhammad, which of course he's a much bigger authority in Islamic law than anyone else. Of course, after the Quran, of course, but he's right after it. And he's not talking about monsters. So again, the story of Sunan Kalijaga becomes necessary again. It's very interesting what we have with the story of Sunan Kalijaga. In one century, it's very useful for defending gamelan. In another century, it becomes kind of useless. And the next century, it becomes useful again. And it's like in and out, in and out, in and out. It's very special and very interesting, in my point of view. After independence, many new law books entered the curriculum of the Islamic boarding schools. Not many new informations can we find them about the topic, but there are some. For example, the Fath al-Mu'in states, no one should accept an invitation if he knows that the host has pictures of living beings in the house, even if these beings do not exist. So we are again here at this story. This book actually has an example of a winged horse. Like everyone knows that winged horses don't exist, but they are intact in shape whatsoever if I paint them, so they could exist. So again, monsters are not allowed to again. So we have this again. But the same author in the same book says that it is still permissible if it teaches little girls. The book exactly states that because by these dolls, for example, the girls learn how to become a mother when they will become mothers. So it is permissible. And this is the most important, Wayang, actually the main purpose, the main role, the main function of Wayang is for teaching people. Of course, not only little girls, everyone, adults and everyone, but the main role of wayang in Javanese society is teaching morals. Like the dalang, who stages the wayang, always has something important to say. And children also learn the good ways of behavior through wayang performances. And as we have seen the story of Sunan Kalijaga again, people learned Islam through wayang and Islamic morals through wayang. So according to this book, there's a very big permission here. I think the most important, that not important whatsoever who says what, but because it teaches people, and it teaches people to Islam, wayang is not just permissible, but it also becomes essential in Javanese Islam, very important in Javanese Islam. And the Nahdlatul Ulama, this kind of, let's say, syncretic party, says that wayang is very good. Also, story of Sunan Kalijaga, if wayang wouldn't exist now, then Javanese would not be Muslims, and its role in education. I have been talking with leaders of Nahdlatul Ulama in different pesantrens, and one of them said that if gold comes from a dog, it's still gold. Like emas keluar dari anjing itu tetap emas. He said. So it's not important that it comes from Hinduism or from anything, for anyone, but it's really, really beneficial for Islam. In the beginning, Muhammadiyah, which was very orthodox in the beginning, was ambivalent with wayang. They said it's not bad, but they did not generally like it. But now, I have been also talking with leaders of Muhammadiyah, and they said that wayang is very useful and very good for the society. It talks about connections with Islam. Of course, the radical groups are always radical. They are against it based on its Hindu origins. They say that how can someone learn Islam through Hindu stories? And they also have this opinion about the depiction of human beings, that it should be forbidden. And they state, it is their opinion, that it has a bad influence on society. This is what they say. And so summarizing it all, arts in Java are rooted in pre-Islamic culture generally, and they are mostly sacral in nature. They were always so, even before Islam. With the arrival of Islam, most of these arts became very important of the local Islamic culture. So they became part of Islam and essential parts of Islam. And while there is a very big corpus of Islamic literature, the main point here, I think, that it's very difficult to find sentences which can be related to the exact arts in Java. As I have said, the books were written far away, centuries before Islam became the religion of the Javanese. And because these are the books which the Javanese law scholars are using to base their arguments on, you can only find analogous arguments. Never find the same instrument, there's no wayang, of course, in these kind of books. They have no knowledge, the authors, about wayang. So people can only find topics which are similar or can be connected. And this means that we have a very wide range of interpretations. As we have seen, from the same book, sometimes from the same sentence, an Islamic scholar can find an argument for some kind of art or against some kind of art. And I think in the end of the day, it only resolves back to the intention of the person. What do he wants to see in that book? How do he want to interpret it? Usually, to say the least. And according to this, we have three ends of the argument today. Like before today, there was only two, but now there's three. So the Nahdlatul Ulama and the so-called traditionalist Muslims try to protect every old tradition based on tolerant interpretation as of the law books itself, and of course the legend of the 9 saints, the Wali Songo. The Muhammadiyah and the modernists are now in the middle of the spectrum. They are a bit more critical with the ancient traditions, trying to be more orthodox, but in general, they still accept them. They say that, of course, it's important. in Java, in the culture, but they also try to shape a new artistic tradition, a bit more close to Islam in their point of view of what is more close and what is not. It's always a kind of, it's also a debate. Of course, the radical groups want to erase everything which is not connected to Islam or Arabic culture. There is a reason why many people call it Arabisasi, Arabization of Indonesian culture. Of course, for them, Javanese traditions are not acceptable, but actually these kind of radical groups are also, their problem is not only with Javanese arts, but in general, they do not like arts. We can say that. Always suspicious. And thank you very much for your attention. This is the end of my presentation. Actually, in my presentation, in my dissertation, I was writing about dances as well, but I don't have the time for now. But now I'm happy to answer your questions. Also, if there is about dances, I can answer that one too. I try at least. So thank you very much, and I'm awaiting your questions.
Thank you, Pak Aaron. Thank you, Aaron. And it was nice presentations, I think, and remembering me to with Pak Adrian Vickers, right about the Islam Pasisiran. So if Aaron, you know very well about Adrian Vickers writing this Facebook, maybe you can read about the perspective of Adrian Vickers about Islam in Pasisiran, not only Islam in Middle East, just only Solo Jogja. So I'm not more comments, but I would like to invite our participant here to maybe any questions for Pak Aaron. Please, you can raise hand or you can write in chat room, please. But we have one question from Arya.
Yeah.
Arya, you can tell to Pak Aaron, or I can read that's your comment in the chat room.
Yes, as you wish, Bu Meriati.
Okay. One question from Arya. Some scholars don't believe all of stories of Wali Songo, Wycliffe, for instance. According to your works, how do you undermine stories of Wali Songo as primary sources to write Indonesian in arts history? Is there any unacceptable information or not? This is a question from Arya.
Okay,
please.
Thank you very much. Yes, please.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much for the question. It's a very good question, because as I have even told like before, that even the story of Sunan Kalijaga of shaping the Wayangs is a very nice story. I really like it. But according to the Islamic law books, there is actually no basis for that, because he did not have to do this according to the books which were written in Java, which were read in Java during those times. And there are also other stories of other sunans, other saints, which I don't know if it could be accepted or not, but they are still very important. So there is nothing that is not important here, because if they true or not, it's not important. The important is that there is this debate, and there are these stories, and the stories are believed by the people for centuries now. And these stories shape the argument, shape the debate, because many people base their arguments on the stories of the Wali Songo. So it enters reality actually. So if they are true or not is not a real concern of us. What is important is that people believe it to be true, and this makes it an essential part of Islamic history in Java. Actually, among these stories, there are many stories which are actually not that much impossible. So, like, for example, the story before, like Sunan Bonang was playing gamelan and wrote the lyrics of Islam. We cannot, I don't say we cannot deny it, because we don't have exact evidence, but it's something which even can be confirmed through the books. So It's an interesting question. Yes, a lot of scholars do not believe in the existence of the Wali Songo, and others do believe in it. But yes, revolving back to the point, I think if it is true or not, that's secondary. That's secondary. The most important is that it's believed by the people, and as it is, it shapes the opinion of the people and shapes the arguments of the people. Yes.
Thank you, Pak Aron. So how about Pak Arya?
Yeah. That's interesting answer. Thank you so much. Yes. I read your works, some of your works, and it's wonderful. And one of your interesting conclusion when you write that Sunan Abang as the Buddhist. This is interesting as well. This is the new conclusion for me.
Yes. There is this Sheikh Siti Jenar, who's very interesting figure in Javanese religious history, and he is at least now considered as an Islamic saint, of course. But of course, he was a bit problematic because it was, according to some stories, even the 9 saints who sentenced him to death because of his let's say secret teachings, which were not always acceptable by them. But it's very interesting. But because if I want to dive in of what were his teachings, okay. So one of the interesting things is that he is said to be so radical in Sufism. And that was the problem. But if I want to read his teachings, it's actually much more Buddhist than Muslim. So he, even his life story is full with analogous stories from the life of the Buddha himself. Yes, it's it is very interesting that now he's considered a Muslim saint. But yeah.
Thank you, Baron.
Well, Pak Aron, we have 2 questions for another participants. First, from Jessica Anastasia. The rejection. Do you think the rejections of hermeneutic in some Islam tradition has influenced the banning of wayang?
Again, sorry, because I can't.
Maybe you can read 2 in your chat room.
Yes, I just.
Okay. This from Jessica Anastasia. Hey, thank you for wonderful presentations. Yes. Okay. Do you think the rejection of hermeneutics in some Islam tradition has influenced the banning of wayang?
The rejection of hermeneutics. I'm not sure that I completely understand the question. Actually, what rejection she's referring to? Because there are many different like this, and I don't know which is the exact question.
Okay. The second question maybe from Pepianti. You can read it. This is from Islam in Southeast Asia. If Indonesia uses gamelan and wayang, and it's very interesting, especially about the debate. But under
Hello. I think we have lost connection.
Hello, Bu Murdiati. And can you hear me, Pak Aron?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. We can wait. Bu Murdiati.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah.
The second question, Pak Aron.
Yes.
From Pepianti. You can read it?
Yes. So it says that from what I have heard earlier, you're also studying about Islam in Southeast Asia. If Indonesia uses gamelan and wayang, and it's very interesting, especially about debates. But are there similarities with countries in Southeast Asia which also use the same method as Indonesia? I mean, using culture or traditional art. Well, of course there is. but if we think about Southeast Asia, like the Islamic countries are mainly like Indonesia is the biggest in this matter, and we still have Malaysia, of course, and Brunei. But of course, yes, in Malaysia, we can actually, I did not research so much about Malaysia, a little bit, yes, but I was focusing on Java. But yes, sure. In Malaysia, we also have wayang, let's say, and we also have gamelan there, and they were used the same way there as in Java. Yes, of course. Art, I think art in general is very important in Southeast Asia, and traditional arts are, I think, they are always become the means of teaching, and teaching, of course, as spreading religion. We also know that even before Islam, in Indonesia, even Hinduism and Buddhism used these kind of arts. So, of course, not just in Java. Sure. And yes, well, as I said, Southeast Asia is very big, and most of the part of it is in Indonesia. And now I was talking about Java only, but we can see the same in Sumatra. We can see the same in Kalimantan and other parts, of course. Yes. I can say yes.
Well, thank you, Pak Aaron. So, any questions for everybody?
Maybe the who was asking before, which can make the question a bit more specific, because I would like to answer it. I just don't really know what she exactly thinks about.
Okay.
Probably I would like add something from Jessica questions. I would like to give the context. I mean, yes, the rejection of hermeneutics. I mean the scriptural hermeneutics.
The scriptural.
Scriptural, and some Muslims community in Indonesia rejects hermeneutic as a method to understand Islamic law or fiqh. Especially some communities rejects wayang and categorize wayang as the bid'ah. It is forbidden for Islam. Is it forbidden for Islam because bid'ah? Islam do not teach about bid'ah. Every single lessons that Muhammad did not show and teach, it is bid'ah. That's why hermeneutics is rejected by some scholars, Muslim scholars communities in Indonesia. I guess Jessica question is for the contemporary era. For the contemporary era. As if I'm not mistaken, from 2 years ago, 2 years ago, some Muslim scholars rejects wayang as the Indonesian heritage. I mean, I just want to add, if I'm not mistaken, from the Jessica questions.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now I understand the question. Yes, and it's really much connects to the presentation I have been giving today. And yes, I know that according to some scholars, wayang should not be staged because that's bid'ah and all the like. And they are mainly these kind of new radical groups, as I know. This is what I have said, that the same books, from the same author, even the same sentences can be interpreted this way and can be interpreted that way. And actually in the debate about how do we interpret something is always depending on this of, do we reject this kind of hermeneutics, or we reject that kind of argument. So in Islamic law, we have this so-called qiyas, which means analogous way of reasoning. And as I have said, these books, of course, do not write about, let's say, wayang. This was the question, right? of course, not about Wayang, but even similar things cannot be found in the books, because it's so much, especially Indonesian, so much, especially Javanese, that of course a person in let's say 30th century Syria had no knowledge of it whatsoever. So a religious scholar can only say that, okay, I will look up in the book if it is how it is forbidden or not for the depiction of livings being a soul, or maybe I can look for the material it's made of, and he can base his arguments upon one of these things. But there will always be other religious scholars who will say that no, it's not logical. Why did you base your argument on that sentence? Why did you not on the other one? And if I think that it is a good base for the argument, why did you why did you have this kind of interpretation? Because in my opinion, says the other one, in my opinion, it should not be read that way, it should be read in another way. So of course, the methodology of how do the religious scholars read and understand the topics, the stories, is, of course, it not just it does influence the stories, actually it is the main reason of the different interpretation of a ban or of a permission of a Javanese tradition. Of course, that's actually the crucial point here. Yes.
Well, thank you, Pak Aaron, for your explanation. Comprehensive, very comprehensive. So one question from Muhammad Fahrisal. So Pak Aaron, maybe you can read it. We know that Islam entered Indonesia through the acculturation route. So it is vulnerable to deflections of the Kappa Islamic creed. How did the Sunans or preachers prevent?
Oh. Yes.
The distortions of the Islamic creed, which was Kappa at the time, and what is the guarantee that Islam at the time was still on the right track?
Okay, very interesting question. Thank you very much. How do they prevent the distortion of the Islamic creed? Actually, I would like to reflect back on this question a little bit. So how do we define true Islam? That's a very good question, right? Is there a true Islam? And here I would like to talk about, I think Indonesians really much know this, which the Nahdlatul Ulama has, what's the name of it? The Pribumi Sase Islam, for example, from Gus Dur. And not just this one, but actually when I was, this comes from Nahdlatul Ulama, but when I was talking with Muhammadiyah leaders, he did not talk about Pribumi Sase Islam, of course, but now they also talk about the same kind of, so they have a very similar point of view, to say. This says that when Islam came down to Prophet Muhammad, that was 7th century Arabia, a nomadic culture, and many laws in the Quran and many laws of Islamic culture are very much useful and very much good in that environment, among those people, at that time. But it does not mean that in another part of the world, in another part of the globe, in another time, these things will be exactly the same, right? So I think with the story of Sunan, of all these Sunans, all these 9 saints, the Wali Songo, we can see a very good explanation for this, that what is good for Arabs in the 7th century is not necessarily good for the Javanese in the 21st century, because it's completely different surroundings, let's say. But of course, it does not mean that everything is invalid. Of course not. But it means that that from the Quran and also from the law books, and actually the purpose of the law books of the fiqh is exactly this. It might have been said by Gusdur only this Pribumi Islam, but actually it's not so much alien from the tradition of Islamic law, and not just in Indonesia, but all over the Islamic world actually, that the main work of these Islamic scholars is to make the rules applicable for the society where they live in, right? So based on the Quran and based on the Hadith and all of these, people can make these kind of rules. Even in Islamic law, there are different kind of arguments. We have Quran, we have Hadith, we have Qiyas, we have Ra'i, we have Ijma', and all of these are different ways of reasoning. Of course, there are stronger and there are weaker ones, but at the end of the day, we can also find something which will be applicable for the people who are living in one time at one place. And sometimes it might see that it's kind of different from what you can read in the books, but if we examine it, if we dive deeper in the question, we will see that there is always some basis of it somewhere in the Quran, in the Hadith, or in one of the fiqh books. There is always something. And even, as I have said before just now, that even for the protecting of these kind of arts, there is always a legal basis. So what is true Islam and what is not true Islam, is, I think it's not for us to say. The most important is, I think that, and it's not just my opinion actually. It's when I was in the one of these Nahdlatul Ulama peace conference, the leader of the peace conference told me that Islam should be a religion which is easy to follow, because if it's difficult to follow, then why would you follow it? If it just makes your life difficult, then there's no point. So it was his opinion, of course. Everyone can have his own opinion. I'm just saying what I have heard from other people more clever than me in Islam. So how did they defend the intactness or not to distort the Islam? I think it would be very difficult to distort Islam because it's a very it's a kind of religion which can always be suitable for the people who believe in it. Yes.
So I'm sure there are still many questions, I think, but time does not allow us to have any question anymore. So I'm not conclusion about this presentations today, but I hope that it will be enlightenment in our knowledge about Islam. Thank you, Pak Aaron, and thank you so much our participants. And saya kembalikan kepada Pak Arya untuk menutup semua acara hari ini. Terima kasih Pak Arya, terima kasih Pak Aaron.
Terima kasih Bu Murdiati sudah menjadi moderator. Terima kasih Pak Aaron, luar biasa. Pak Aaron ini poliglot ya, poliglot yang bisa banyak bahasa. Saya sampai kagum ya. Kalau Pak Aaron ini bisa bahasa Persia, Arab, Jerman juga bisa. Aduh. Ya, terima kasih Pak Dubes yang dari awal sampai akhir ya masih mendengarkan dan mengikuti ya, terima kasih. Thank you very much for all participants, all attendants, both from Hungary and in Indonesia, and thank you so much for everyone. And once more, Pak Aaron, seperti yang saya sampaikan tadi di awal, tahun depan kita bikin acara yang lebih besar yang melibatkan Hungaria dan Indonesia, khususnya kebudayaan dan sejarah. Baik Pak, berikutnya barangkali ada tambahan dari Pak Wahab, Pak Dubes, ya, Pak Dimas Wahab, mungkin Pak Dimas, Pak Dubes.
Ya, sedikit aja. Hebat ya, Aaron ya. Terima kasih banyak. Jadi nanti kita diskusi ya, kawan-kawan. Oke, menarik, sangat menarik. Sekali lagi penghargaan setinggi-tingginya buat Aaron. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih Bapak Dubes.
Terima kasih Pak Dubes, terima kasih Bapak-Bapak, Ibu-Ibu yang hadir di sini, yang sudah mendengarkan dan menyimak dari Universitas Udayana, Universitas Patimura, Universitas UPN Jakarta, Pendidikan Ganesha Bali, ya, dari LT sendiri, dari students, from students or lecturers, and who attend today. So I would like to close this webinar, this public series, Forum 2, and then I would like to thank you so much for all of you, ya, Pak Dimas Wahab yang sudah mendukung, Bu Murtiati, Pak Aaron, and everyone. Thank you so much. And we will have more public lecture next week with the Professor Gabor from University of Debrecen. He will deliver ethnography and society. And if some of you would like to participate and would like to join, it will be pleased. And thank you so much. I will close this public lecture series of Forum 2. And thank you so much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi. Selamat siang, selamat sore, good afternoon, good evening for Hungarian, Indonesian, and other countries. Thank you so much, Bu Murtiati, Pak Aaron, Pak Dimas. Saya tutup ya webinar ini. Terima kasih banyak.
Terima kasih Pak Aaron, terima kasih Pak Dimas.
Sama-sama. Sampai jumpa.
Sampai jumpa.
Terima kasih Mas Arya, makasih Pak Aaron, Ibu, Bu Murtiati.
Terima kasih.
Sampai jumpa.
Minggu depan.
Iya.